Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our other talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. This is our once monthly talk that we do for the folks who have a hard time joining us at our usual Sunday talk time. So it is 10:30 a.m. Pacific time here on Sunday. And usually we meet on
21st.
Yeah.
It's the Ides of whatever month it is.
We usually meet at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. So this is our little extra for those who can't make it at that time or just can't get enough of us and decide to join us twice in one day, which is very brave and very awesome. All right. So I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I am the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, and
can tell us apart because her hair is a different color.
Yeah, working towards that. Let's see, who do we have?
Yemeni.
Yes. All right. Cool. So we are back after a bit of a hiatus because, as many of you know, and as some of you were able to participate in, we had our retreat last week. So it's been a week since then. We've been home. Some of us are off on other adventures post-retreat. And for those of us who are able to be here today, it's exciting to see your faces once again. Thank you for being here. Unfortunately, not both of us got to go last week, and that is a whole tale within itself, which will probably unfold between this talk and the next. But it is so nice to be back together again now to join with you all as well. So thank you for being here. It is nice to be a bit back to normal, huh?
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the evening video. Because that's going to be touching on hazard, universal hazard, and the dark side of the force.
Yep. Oi, do we have any announcements though up front?
We're happy to see you all.
Yay! Yeah. As you can see, we're in a new place. We are still on our Sufi roadshow journey.
Yes.
So
yeah, we have found the Airbnb from hell.
It's not that bad. It's definitely not what we hoped it would be, but it could be worse.
Yeah.
We keep noticing things that are worse.
And rats, it would be worse, but that would be anyway. Enough of the bitching, moaning, and complaining. Even though we feel a bit like we're entitled to that, given everything that we've been through. We're just putting that out there. Thank you for putting up with us. We're human. Oh yeah, and I want to change this into speaker mode. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Close and personal now. Yes. All right. So I guess, we don't have anything specific to announce today, so let's just leap into it, shall we? All right. We are talking about fear. And I have a story. Fear and hope from the Sufi perspective. Yeah. So tell us the story, Mushtaq. A king, known for his sternness, said to the Mullah Nasruddin, "You were introduced to me as an oracle, but you turn out to be a common fool. I think I shall have you hanged." Mullah said, without losing a moment, "But sire, I can see the stars in the daylight and the demons deep in the earth." "How did you suddenly become so perceptive?" asked the king. "Fear, sire, is all you need," the mullah replied meekly. And that should set off the tone for the day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that feels resonant. Yeah. All right. So how do we think we're conceptualizing fear in this context? Okay. People have a lot of considerations about fear. Yeah. First, I will say that fear is absolutely necessary. We know this because of scientific experiments. There is one really brutal, mean, horrible, ugly, nasty experiment that a scientist did by capturing a bunch of monkeys and performing brain surgery on them and removing the part of their amygdala that engenders fear response.
Yeah, we're definitely not condoning that.
No. And after he did that and they healed up, he let them loose into the wild again. And not one of them lived longer than a week. Why is this, do you think? Anybody got any ideas why that would be?
Because they try to make friends with the local tiger?
Pretty much, yeah. When you're a monkey and the tiger comes up and goes, hi, your proper reaction is to go eek and climb a tree really fast. But these guys were like, eh.
Intriguing, yes.
Did not work out so well. So that kind of hints at the importance of fear. Now, I have gone so far as to say that human beings are fear-based beings. It is our root emotion in certain ways. When you dig down underneath all of the other stuff, you usually find fear.
So that sounds very like animal, like
or
that.
Growl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Given that that is indeed what we are, of course, there's going to be that part of us that is clearly viscerally animal. So that makes sense to me that fear would be such a driving part of us.
What she said.
But it doesn't end there.
No.
And that's the amazing thing about the opportunity to, I mean, we don't know the inner life of any other creature really, but we do know that being in this human body gives us the opportunity to practice around and beyond fear. And that's a pretty incredible thing that we should not take for granted because it can be so empowering.
Yep.
Yeah. But one thing we did have come up this week is that someone was saying, fear is something, as you said, to be excised. Like, how do you get over it? How do you remove it? Fear is bad. I shouldn't have it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly know growing up that I thought the ideal was to be like completely unflinching. Yeah, to just have those parts of me. If I could have removed them, I probably would have.
Yeah, but you're a city girl.
I also, as I mentioned elsewhere, was obsessed with the stereotype of the Zen monk.
Yeah.
Meaning, you just, nothing shakes you, is how I imagined that being. And I don't think that was fair to myself at all.
I remember the first time I met a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know snakes, right? First time I met a rattlesnake in the wild. I'd seen rattlesnakes. Somebody, a rattlesnake came into our compound, and one of my uncles brought me over and said, "This is a rattlesnake," and it did its thing. And I wasn't particularly afraid. I didn't want to touch it or anything, but it was like, there's a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
And one day I'm walking through the desert, minding my own business, and I hear a rattle down by my foot. Yes, I discovered that I could levitate straight up and 10 feet back before I even know how I got there.
It's a different context.
It's a totally different context, and it was totally fear-driven. And then I caught my breath and went, oh, rattlesnake.
Yeah.
I had not even consciously figured out that it was a rattlesnake before my body reacted for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very instinctive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything?
I mean, the fact is that this is built into us.
Yes.
And it's purposeful in that it allows us to have those tripwires in us that protect us and keep us safe in encounters like that. That seems to be the case anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, I experienced something interesting last week. You just brought it to mind. You know, I'm in Denmark, and I'm wrapping up my trip to Europe, and I decide to take a stroll in the park I see outside my hotel. And there's this Pomeranian in the park. It's like a children's playground. I wanted to go swing on the swings. Those of you who know me well know that I love swinging on swings when I
have photos.
Take the opportunity. Yeah. So I encountered this Pomeranian, and I didn't see they were human. So I thought maybe this was just some random dog. And I'm little, so even a medium-sized dog is going to be a little bit of a challenge for me if it wants to do harm to me. But I found myself getting into the mode of being ready to defend myself, because I was like, oh no, I know that if I run, this is going to be problematic if it really does have the intention to hurt me. So I found myself going into that mode of feeling the adrenaline come up and all of that. So
you have your stick friend with you?
Of course I had my cane with me, my stick friend. Yeah. And I was ready to defend myself if need be, while also realizing that I had to be careful about also overly signaling threat to this dog and initiating an attack that way. But I had the sensibility to be able to be present with what I was experiencing and not over or under react. And that puts us in a healthier relationship to fear, as we'll be talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we've already said, we don't want to excise fear, because fear has so much to teach us about engaging with our environment in ways that are going to be self-protective, responsive. Of course, there are many ways to enact fear, and we know that we have at least 3 primary responses, but there may be more. What are those?
You have, people used to say it was fight or flight. Then somebody figured out that it was fight, flight, or freeze. And you can see that in most wild animals. There's a 4th one, though, that nobody talks about, which is fight, flight, freeze, or flow.
Yeah.
That one is going to be one of the topics today, part of the topic. And some people say that there's a 5th one. I disagree with this.
Fawning.
Fawn, yes.
Yeah.
Fawn is a maladaptive mechanism when you are in some sort of negative relationship and you try and, oh, don't hurt me, don't hurt me. But that's a much more cerebral development than the instinctual reaction.
It's kind of like taking freeze to the next level in a way.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know that I have never, in all of the animals I have ever observed, including humans, see an animal get frightened. The mountain lion comes in and the deer goes, oh, don't hurt me. Doesn't happen. So that has to be a more cerebral response.
Okay. Yeah. So.
But I have to say, I find out that this is a very, very popular thing. It's downright woke. I scoff at this stuff.
You scoff at this stuff, clearly. But I think that when we realize that we have different ways of engaging with our fear, that's the main thing to take away from this, is that we have not only the built-in things, the fight, the flight, and the freeze, and perhaps the fawning that we develop over a sense of socialization and all of that stuff, but we also have flow.
Yes.
And in a context of being frightened, being overwhelmed, flow becomes a really powerful way of channeling fear. that allows you to turn it into an ally as opposed to an encounter with an enemy. Because when we think of fight, flight, freeze, those are like, oh no, something is going to harm me. I am experiencing fear, and that means I'm in danger. Or I'm in danger, and thus I'm experiencing fear. And then we get wrapped up in that autonomic response, right? That is automatic, as I said, and it is just, it takes control, it takes the wheel. It can make us feel like we don't have a choice in how we're responding to the situation. But if we can allow our bodies to encounter the sense of arousal we experience in a state of fear and use that energy as kind of like a way of sharpening the senses, a way of tuning into our environment, and of sensing into our bodies more acutely, it becomes an empowering experience as opposed to a potentially traumatizing one. So let's say more about that.
Okay. What would you like to
say? He knows that after having run the retreat last week, he's going to keep pushing me to step up. So that's what's happening right now. Yeah.
And she's experiencing a little fear.
I am. And I have to pretty much practice what I preach. As I tell you, the fear response is pretty powerful. And for someone like me who has patterns that push me into anxiety, which means my heart rate increases, my breath becomes shallow. I kind of just want to curl up in a ball or go hide in a dark room or something. And then I have to sit with that discomfort essentially and figure out not how to power through it in the way of stuffing it down and ignoring it, though actually, I mean, there is a degree of walking through it, I guess we could say. I like to use the metaphor of the rickety rope bridge, which for me can be a very visceral thing when I encounter a scenario where I feel like I have to push myself while feeling the fear. That can feel pretty existential if it's something that's triggering a deep-seated fear reaction in me. Then it feels like walking across a rickety rope bridge. I feel like, I feel like I could die. Whether that's realistic or not doesn't matter. That's the bodily sensation of it. And yet you keep going anyway, because what is on the other side of that is something so enticing, so desirable, so compelling that it is worth the discomfort. And then it's so satisfying when you do get past the most acute sensations of fear and you realize that you have overcome.
So, years and years and years ago, one of my very first mentors taught me about fear. And it was a very simple lesson. He said, "You know how afraid you are?" And I thought about it. And since I was honest with him, I said, "Yeah, everybody you meet is just as afraid as you are. Everyone." And that little thing changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if the person I'm talking to, no matter how they present themselves, has that core of fear in them, then they're no different than me.
Was that something you feared, that you were?
Oh, I think everybody thinks, oh my God, everybody else is brave and I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah. If everybody is equally terrified, and that's what got me to the idea that humans are fear-based beings, that exact experience. Now, fear and hope go together. I am going to read you a thing. This comes from the Fihi Mafihi, which is...
That's Rumi's, right?
That's Rumi.
That's a non-poem.
Non-poem Rumi talking to his students and teaching them stuff. It is a magnificent book. Everyone should read it. It will cure you of thinking that Rumi is just some fluffy poet. Says, someone asked whether or not there is harm in putting one's hopes in God and expecting a good recompense for having done good and good works. Rumi replies, yes, one must have hope and faith, or, expressed in another way, fear and hope. Someone asked me, since hope itself is a good thing, what is fear? Show me fear without hope, I said. I said, or hope without fear, for these two are inseparable. Since you ask, I will give you an example. When someone plants wheat, he of course hopes that it will grow, and at the same time, however, he is fearful that some blight or disaster may befall it. It is obvious that there is no such thing as hope without fear, neither fear without hope. Without fear, hope without fear can be imagined.
So either way, yeah.
Either way.
They're two sides of the same coin. They go together.
So if you experience fear and you have no hope, the tiger steps out and he goes, rawr. And you have no hope of surviving. You give up. That little kernel of hope makes you pick up the rock and throw it at the tiger. And then shimmy up a tree. And then drop coconuts on the tiger. Or whatever it is that you're going to do to try and stay alive. And if you are hopeful of something, you have to understand that sometimes God has other ideas. You have to do your due diligence, and we talk about that all the time. You have to make sure if you plant the wheat, you also remove the weeds, take care of the bugs, do whatever you can do to make sure that that wheat crop comes to fruition. And even so, that day God might say, you know, you guys really need a famine. Boom, no wheat. Why would God do that? We don't know. But we know he does stuff like that. Should we even care? No. We just got to know that hazard exists, and it exists for a reason. And we're going to talk about that in the evening talk. These two talks are completely connected with each other. So you're going to have to listen to the evening talk after we put it up if you can't join us.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for each of us, there are bits of the reality of, you know, fear and hope and hazard, but I almost feel like hazard really kicked your ass. Yeah,
hazard and a little bit of the dark side of the force, right? Yeah.
And for me, it was fear that really tried to kick my ass. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of why it might be important to share a little bit about how this retreat really brought home the reality of what we're talking about for me.
Explain it to them.
Yeah. So when we originally planned this retreat, right, I get nervous about any kind of thing we have to do that's like performance oriented. It could be a Sunday talk. It could be a course we're doing. It could be something I have to write, all of that stuff. So originally we had planned for the retreat in Sweden to be something that we did together, of course, as a team. And to some extent, we expected Mushtaq to take the lead because he's done this before and has plenty of experience.
I am old and wise and have seen many winters.
Yeah, whereas I had never led anything this extensive remotely of this kind of thing in my life. So in the mix of all the other things we had going on, because of the way things unfolded with some trouble with Mushtaq's passport coming up, where it did not arrive, the renewed passport we were hoping for did not arrive within the time frame necessary for him to be able to,
and that's a whole story in it,
lead this retreat with me, which is where Hazard comes in for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I had been guaranteed that the passport would arrive before we left. But no.
That did not happen. Yeah. And there are several components to that. But on my end of it, it began to dawn on me that it was very possible at that point that I would be, as I said, leading this retreat alone. And I did not feel equipped for that. I did feel as though perhaps I had been leaning on Mushtaq a little bit too hard, a lot too hard to carry that, I guess we could say. And I knew that meant that I had a lot of work to do in the, what was it, like a week and a half, a week prior to this retreat. And like I said, I'd never done anything like this in my life before. I think I've led maybe a couple talks alone. And it's almost awkward to admit that. But I think also that's part of me addressing my fear, is owning up to where I feel this discomfort with my role as a teacher. But in this particular case, it really was like being thrown into the deep end and realizing just how much I would have to step up to make this everything that it needed to be, that our students who had signed up deserved for it to be, and also what I needed it to be in order to become the kind of teacher that I envisioned myself being. I knew that in order to become that kind of teacher, I would have to struggle for it. And that the struggle would be part of the learning experience itself, part of the developing experience. And so I was bracing myself, and perhaps to some extent making it harder on myself than it needed to be. But I needed to find a way to bring my energy up, my motivation up, in order to see this through in a way that would be transformative enough for our students and also for me, because this was a God-given opportunity to embrace all the things that I saw as holding me back. And to stand alone in doing that, honestly, was one of the most intense experiences of my life.
I can imagine.
Yeah, like, I mean, I've been through some harrowing things, like that infection last year.
That was pretty harrowing.
But this was like adventure of a lifetime type stuff. Yeah. I've never been to Europe before, by the way. So traveling to Denmark and then to Sweden alone was a whole thing unto itself, but it paled in comparison to the fact that I knew I was going to have to step up and provide a sense of leadership and guidance for what may be the whole 5 days of this retreat, because we didn't know if you were coming at that point or not.
Yeah.
But I was,
at first it was, your passport will be there. And then it was, your passport will be there 2 days late. So I literally changed my flight and sent her on her way thinking, okay, I'll be there in 2 days and that'll just be a day after the thing starts.
And I acknowledge that, but I personally had to operate as if you weren't coming.
Which turned out to be the case.
And like, I can't imagine if I had been counting. I do count on you, no question about that. But I mean, if I had been counting on you specifically to be there in 2 days, I would not have had that forward momentum necessary to envision carrying the whole thing. And Wael was there through that. The whole dark night of the soul I went through the day before, he was witness to that. And he held space for me and challenged me in the ways that I apparently needed to be challenged. And sometimes literally held my hand through it and cheered me on. And I'm so grateful that he was there. And Jonathan and Emina were there for me in ways that I cannot describe how supportive they were to me. And so many others that week. And these were people that I was teaching and I was facilitating for, and yet we really were facilitating for each other. Thank God. But that made it all the more awesome an experience. And I use that in the most raw definition of the term awesome, because I am in awe of how powerful it was to be pushed in that way and to succeed.
And so you found the way into flow.
Yes. And it might have been Jonathan who mentioned that it was as if I had stepped into the flow of it through the fear. Yeah.
And that's part of the point of this talk, is that the fact that fear can lead to flow is something that we have to remember, because since we're fear-based beings and we always have the fear, we can always enter into the flow. And we forget that. I mean, that's why the most common entrance into the flow state is extreme sports, because jumping off a cliff with a little parachute is definitely a terrifying experience. Trying to surf a 60-foot wave is a terrifying experience. All of these extreme sports, skiing down Mount Everest is a terrifying experience. And all of those give you the opportunity to enter flow, not just the opportunity, but the necessity of entering flow. Because if you are wingsuiting down the side of a mountain and you don't get into flow state, you're going to die. It's going to happen unless you're just incredibly lucky, but basically you're going to die if you're not in flow. And while that is a pretty effective way to do it, I don't think that it's a good way to do it. It's like bear slapping. Y'all know what bear slapping is, right?
No.
Okay, it's something that we used to do when we were kids, which is you find a sleeping black bear.
Oh my God.
And you sneak up on it. You got to be really quiet. You creep up and then you slap it and you run away.
Like on the ass?
Yeah, like on the ass. And then you split as fast as you can while the bear goes, and then probably chases you at some point, or at least gets really upset. You can win at bear slapping 100 times, but if you lose even once, there's no 101. So there's a certain amount of fear to that. And believe it or not, people did that. And occasionally people got it.
Good midnight snack for that bear, I guess.
Well, you usually do it during the day.
I mean, in the middle of hibernation. Yeah. Bad kid.
So bear slapping.
Noisy neighbors.
Yeah, the walls in this place are paper thin.
So I'd like to take an opportunity for thoughts and questions.
Okay, thoughts and questions.
Yeah, we've been rambling a while. As fascinating as we are, I'd love to hear from you guys.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Osama.
Yeah, hey, yeah, sorry. Reese? Yep.
Hello, welcome back. Thank you guys for this talk again. I have a question. How can a person, how can I know when fear is real and when it's not? So there's this story that that I heard on one of you a YouTube channel talking about a guy who got stuck in one of those big fridge containers.
Ooh, yeah.
He was trying to clean the inside of the fridge, and he got locked in by mistake. And the thermostat was not working properly, so it was showing a false temperature. And he was there, and he panicked. Obviously, he was afraid, and at some point he started to write on the wall of the container, saying that, oh, it's getting colder. It's getting colder. He can't feel his fingers, his fingertips, all that kind of stuff. And finally, he actually died. The interesting thing is that when they went inside the container, the temperature was like 51, 52 degrees. So he definitely didn't die from freezing or anything like that. It just the thermostat was not working. However, it's kind of like he talked himself into dying.
People do that.
Yeah. So fear, sometimes I experience it in that, well, not as extreme as that story, but where I kind of talk myself into, or I experience fear and then talk myself into staying in that container, let's say, even though I'm not in that situation anymore. I'm no longer in that fear situation. So how can one realize that, okay, there was a moment of fear, but I don't have to carry it with me. It's not real anymore, or the threat is not real. The tiger is not here anymore.
A good question, and this is where hope comes in. If I had been trapped in the same situation, I would have been looking around going, okay, do I feel cold? I feel a little cold. What's here with me? That would be the first thing. If there's a bunch of boxes, I'm going to build an igloo out of the boxes and get inside of that thing so that I can conserve my body heat, because I have hope that somebody's going to open the door, and so I don't give up. That guy sounds like he had no hope, and so he gave up. That's like the person who sees the tiger and just throws up their hands and go, I can't get away from this. I'm going to get out. So the fear and hope have to come together. So you can ask yourself, when you're feeling afraid, how can I get out of this fearful situation? And that's where the hope comes in. What are the tools that I can have to work with to get myself out of this, to protect myself? Also, is the fear immediate or is it chronic? That's a big thing. Chronic fear has to be dealt with differently. Immediate fear is usually something that has some reality to it. You're walking in a parking garage at night and you see 3 people coming up behind you and you feel that little tug.
Prickle.
Yeah, and you go, I don't like the way these guys are moving. They aren't moving like somebody who's looking for their car. And so you act. Or you take your wallet and you throw it at them and run, you know, whatever. And that's different than constantly being afraid that like the stock market's going to crash or that you're not going to be able to pay your rent or that sort of thing. That kind of chronic fear is neurotic and needs to be dealt with at that level versus the immediacy of the warning of your intuition that something in your environment is dangerous. And there's a sensory hierarchy for that, interestingly enough. The most sensitive sense you have for fear is actually your ears, hearing. Then your nose, and only then your eyes.
Your nose, really?
Yeah, your nose. Because most predators don't smell all that good.
Mm.
I mean, they all have bad breath.
Okay, so yeah, like the tiger.
Yeah.
Can...
Tigers smell like tigers.
Mm.
But the first is hearing. Crackle in the brush behind you.
I guess.
But by the time you see the tiger, you're in trouble.
It can also be fumes, right?
Yeah, fumes.
Like chemical fumes.
Or smoke. Smoke is the most common smell in the woods, surprisingly. But if it's coming on the wind, that's a different thing.
Yes. Yeah, I think breath is an important component in this. And Emina says, fear, Hauf,
yeah,
takes breath away or freezes breath, but hope, Rija, allows breath. So to realize real fear from false fear, we need to be able to return back to the breath. Yes.
Which is absolutely factual down to its smallest degree.
Thanks, Em. Yeah, and that's a tool in the toolkit.
Yeah.
In relation to fear.
So the first thing you got to do when you feel fear is attend to your breath, because that's going to keep you focused in the present.
Yeah.
And if the fear is a rational fear, a fear that there's something in your environment that's dangerous, you need to be focused.
I found that was so helpful to me during the retreat. Like I led everyone through guided meditations and we tuned into the breath and stuff. And even if it wasn't, an existential threat to my life, it was that tuning into the breath that allowed me to be present in the moment and to stay committed to my intention of conveying things in a sensible, authoritative way. And I couldn't have done that without the breath.
Yeah. The breath allows you to ask yourself, what tools has Allah spread about the environment for me to discover? Because this is a lot like one of these stupid reality shows where they take one or two people and they drop them in the middle of the wilderness with nothing and maybe a few clues as to where you might find a knife and that sort of thing. God does this to you all the time. Sometimes it gets old, but he definitely does this to you. And it's like he expects you to pay attention and find the clues to where the good tools are. Some days are better than others. But that's the hope. That's the hope part. The tools are there. And you got to find them. And you have to use your fear to wake you up and get you into flow so that you can find them. Because running away or fighting or freezing are not the best options in some cases. Flow is always the best option because it allows you to do the other three as necessary in the appropriate order and intensity.
Intuitively rather than just reactively.
Yeah.
Because it goes faster than your thought, regardless.
Yeah, and that's why you need the flow state in this, is that it goes faster than you can think.
Yep. It's just a more grounded way of you know, the body doing its thing faster than you can think, but just not in that like triggered sort of way, I guess we could say.
Okay, who else wants to talk to us before we start calling on people?
Yeah, and feel free to unmute yourselves, because we can see that it's different when I'm not at my own computer screen able to monitor things, but unmuting or doing the little reaction hands up are probably the easiest ways to get our attention.
And if you don't talk, Nora's going to call on you.
You know how I do.
She do that, so now you can be afraid.
All right, so we have Brian.
Yes, he was who I was thinking.
Hey, I was just kind of thinking how detrimental fear can be in regards to things that are new and unknown.
Oh yeah, that is hardwired into us at a genetic level. Fear of the unknown. And there's a small percentage of people, of humans, who don't have much of that. Life is riskier for them, but oftentimes more rewarding. And there are some people who have it in spades, and life is boring for them. You need just the right amount of fear of the unknown.
Because that's what creates that sense of adventure.
Yeah.
Right? It's not an adventure if there's no anticipation, risk, challenge to be addressed in some way.
Yeah, think about the first person sitting by their cave and going, I wonder what would happen if, instead of chasing those wolves off with all of these torches, if I tossed one some food. And he does it, or she does it, because we don't know who it was. And the next thing you know, we got puppies.
Puppies.
And that's a good thing. And we've done that a number of times. You know, think about the person who figured out that you could make friends with this humongous beast that could kick you 20 feet through the air if you weren't careful. And the next thing you know, you're riding around on his back and you're the best buddies.
Which creature is that?
Horse.
Horse, yes.
Or donkey, either way.
Yeah.
Both of them can kick you into Sunday.
We hope to avoid that.
Yes.
Steve. And Jonathan as well afterwards. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting to excuse me. It's interesting to incorporate both fear and hope together. I'm thinking of so in Buddhism, you have what's called preliminary practices, are called nundro. And people are in certain schools, they're done, other ones they're not done at all. But in one phrase it says moving beyond fear and hope. And in their worldview and their context, the fear and hope is based on the sense of I. It's form, and that's its own little bunny hole you can go down. But typically what I've seen in my own experience has been, well, you know, if this happens, or if I initiate doing something, what will happen to I? Or better known as me, you know? And that's where the imagination can start getting fruity, where people think, this is what's going to happen. You know, I'll be acknowledged as a big shot, or I'll be laughed at, or I'll be misunderstood, or I'll be whatever, repressed, suppressed, sublimated, whatever the case might be. So it's interesting because I think that kind of addresses our self-image that we have, that we use or maybe not use when interacting with other people and circumstances. And not only that, but so that's a psychological aspect of kind of like fear and hope. But the faith aspect of fear and hope is stories were written down for our benefit. And I think what happens is that when you neglect these stories, like modern scholarship has done today, and a whole bunch of people do, by calling them all sorts of nasty things, one's faith, per se, in God can be undermined, Like God told Noah, build an ark. He didn't say build an ark, 200 times. If you take a look at the patriarchs' lives, their lives are pretty long. He didn't tell them that, 65 times, build an ark, build an ark, build an ark. 5 years go by, build an ark, build an ark, build an ark. No. But it was understood that, look, this needs to happen because judgment's going to happen. And the people listening would have been like, well, we've seen Noah all of our lives, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, so we're going to do our own thing. And they did, and then they were gone when the flood came, which so many cultures talk about in their oral stories. Flood coming, wiping out humanity. And so that, I think that's the faith aspect of fear and hope, where trusting in the goodness of God, in the faithfulness of God, in the midst of, I don't see anything, I don't feel anything, my dart throwing buddy with me hasn't told me anything at all. There's nothing going on. For all practical purposes, everything is flat, without any pointers from God, per se. And so it's important to have this understanding of the faithfulness of God in circumstances, and not rely on oneself, because I've seen that happen too many times with me. It's like, I'm going to make it happen. It's like with Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. A promise was given. Abraham said, nope, it's on me, through Sarah's prompting, of course, but ultimately he made the decision to do what he did. And then it's like, now what do we do? So it's a cautionary tale of
and it may be getting a little bit far afield for this talk.
Yeah. So, but basically, I just wanted to share that. That's how I see it from the psychological and faith, fear and hope aspects of things, anyway.
Yeah. And that reminds me of an old Arabic saying, which I find to be incredibly useful and powerful, which is, trust in Allah, but tie your camel.
Yep. So, Jonathan was unmuted at one point, and we also have Wael has his hand up.
Okay, Jonathan, talk to us. Recite poetry for us. People discovered that Jonathan is actually a superb poet. It's a secret that we're telling everyone.
Well, a couple of days ago, I made the worst driving error of my life.
Oh, no.
I just pulled out straight in front of an oncoming car. And I just didn't see it. And as I was right in the middle of the road, I froze. I didn't continue. I put the brakes on and just sat there in the middle of the lane, staring at this car that was hurtling towards me. There was enough time, and they slowed down, and there was a lot of honking and, angry fist shaking. But finally, I I unfroze and I continued on, but I was shocked by the reaction, which was to freeze. Well, I was shocked that I didn't see the car, and I think, even more shocked that I froze, and I was ashamed of my reaction, because it was the dumbest thing to do. And it took me like 20 minutes just of what happened, what just happened, as I was returning home. Anyway, the conclusion that after having had that experience was just a very basic conclusion was, I need to slow down and be more observant and be more present. Just that.
That would be the exact perfect first step. Now, there are steps you can take after that, because you know now that, at least in some circumstances, your primary fear reaction is to freeze, which is useful in some circumstances and not useful in others. And this was one of the not useful ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's there for a reason, but then we have to figure out how to apply it. Yeah.
You have to condition yourself through experience to have choice in situations like that. And there's a number of different ways to do it. Some of them are very harsh. I was listening to a description earlier today of like how the Navy SEALs do it, by just increasing the stress and intensity, and giving you no choice but to carry on and to do the right thing or die, preferably before you're out in the field. So there are ways to do that, and we will be discussing those probably in the digital Durga, because I don't want people to be working on that without
some kind of guidance. Structure.
Because then you start doing scary things too fast, too hard, and end up trying to surf a 60-foot wave. And where's the fun in that?
So I also think it's important to, having been through that experience, how would you describe what happened afterwards? Were you looking for the meaning in it? Were you attached to the feeling of arousal that you were experiencing? How would you describe what followed that?
What followed was, I was fearful that I've got at least a bunch more years of driving in my life. And is this going to be the way I'm going to end up crippled or dead in a car accident?
Yeah.
And how?
Or you start using driving as your practice.
Yes. Yes. And I have been.
Yeah.
But unless it's a continuous practice while driving, it needs to become a continuous practice while driving.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're okay, Jonathan. That must have been
slightly terrifying, and you're not allowed to get into horrendous automobile accidents. Just so you know, it's completely forbidden for you. So don't.
Well, thanks for sharing. And yeah, I think that there's more to be unpacked and discovered there. But as Mushtaq said, digital Durga.
Yeah. So Wael has some things to say.
It's more of a question, really.
Good. Yeah.
And my question is, how do we find, spread, promote hope in a world full to the brim, if not overflowing, with nothing but fear? The news, the TV, they've got people are scared of their own self, let alone other things. How do we do that?
We encourage the shift towards adulthood, because the thing that hope gives you, the thing that you need with hope, is the ability to look into the future and plot a course to where you want to go. And that's an adult thing.
To believe it's possible, even, is an adult thing. Because if you have a sense of, oh, everything just comes at me in life and I have no consequentiality. I made it up.
Okay.
It's mine
It's
now.
a cool word. Yeah, I like it.
There's nothing consequential about my existence, then you've already checked out. You're not living into your adulthood in that case. So I would say part and parcel to being an adult, at least in my opinion, is this sense of having agency, having some room to choose. And with that comes the possibility of a positive outcome, of something that we are able to welcome. So that's a key component, I would say.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Very much so. Very, very much. And I think in childhood, we can be very fearful of the dark, very fearful of noises and so on. And to stay childlike in our fear can have a very high cost. And I love what you said, what you both said about how being an adult is how we get over that, and how we come back to agency, how we come back to choices, all of which are outcomes of the work that we do. The process of becoming an adult is therefore the weapon that we use to promote that hope in ourselves and others. Thank you. That was a brilliant answer for me. Thank you.
Here's something that's weird.
Yeah, I have something to add too, but you go first.
After you. Ladies first.
Ladies first, huh?
Yeah. Beauty before.
Fair enough. Surrender. I think, conscious surrender is also an adult behavior, as opposed to unconscious surrender, which is just, I don't know, screw it. Shit happens. Things happen to me. I don't happen to the world. I'm just going to lay down and die, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
As
being,
opposed to the other attitude, which is, yeah, I happen to the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We like that one.
Right. But there are circumstances we cannot change, we cannot control.
Lots of them.
Yes. So I don't want to disregard that while talking about agency, but I want to say that that is included within agency.
Yeah, and even if you're in a situation where you can control almost nothing, there are always a few things that you can control. You can control your responses. You can control your breath, if nothing else. You can choose to breathe consciously. If you can't control your breath, you're probably dying. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, we talked a bit about this during the retreat, that there is almost always room to exercise agency.
Yeah. So here's a weird thing. What controls fear in human beings is a little mass of flesh at the base of your brain called the amygdala. It's a very old part of your brain. As a matter of fact, it's lizard brain stuff. And it develops very, very early on in childhood development. The amygdala is working almost from the get-go. The part of the brain that can mediate that is the prefrontal cortex. And that doesn't even start to finish developing for like 24 years. And so we get into the childhood habits of allowing our amygdala to control our life. and never learn to use our higher functions to mediate that in the way that is necessary. And so when I say human adulthood is necessary, I mean that including on a biological level. And that requires work because you have a lifetime of habit to break.
Ugh,
Yeah, I know.
I'm exhausted just talking about it.
Yeah, so who else have we not heard from? Yes, Athir. Tell me how to pronounce your name properly.
Hello, everyone. Athir. Athir.
Athir.
We're going to struggle with that sound, especially me, but
It's okay. It's okay. I'm glad I could make it today. This opportunity was granted by only Allah, I would say, and I decided to take it. There is a little bit of fear in me attending. It's my first time being on live, on the live ones. But I'm glad I made it. Now, speaking of fear, I find it, I see it existing on different levels in relation to the nature of hazards as well. Recently, I'm witnessing a lot of, for example, close ones to me where they are experiencing fear that is literally triggered by delusion, nothing in reality. And it takes them fully into severe anxieties where they need some medical consultations. I connect that where sometimes like I ask myself, what do you say for yourself as an readiness to be ready for a real hazard entering your life, because that can happen. Either me being in the wrong neighborhood, the wrong time, or like what Mushtaq said at the beginning, things just can arrive from Allah, like death, for instance. When for example, death, when you see that occurring, you know someone is dying, you've got really nothing to do except accepting that state and enter a flow of preparing. So what I'm trying to say is I feel that at times we put ourselves in a state of fear that is triggered by hazards that do not exist. And we lose we lose on time, we lose on even capabilities, you know, to prepare ourselves for what comes in reality. And we say in this part of the world that fear kills. Actually, it kills. It can kill someone, you know, even when it's based on delusion. Mainly when it's based on delusion, it can kill someone. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I think the thing about fear is that we need to understand that it is a physiological response at its core.
Yeah.
And
the psychological stuff gets piled up.
Yeah. But it emerges even with perceived threats, things that are not perhaps literally actually there, but within our system, the reaction we're having is as if it is real. And that's something that we need to understand either way, is that it all comes back to those physiological things.
And that's where we have to start in dealing with it.
Yeah. Yep. Whether there are things actually happening in our environment or in our bodies or whatever that we are responding to, or we're imagining them, or we're just picking up on traces of things that then get built up into something that seems overwhelming and threatening. Perceived, that's the key word, perceived threat. That's what our body responds to. Yeah.
It's a real feeling, regardless of what triggers it. The physical feel is there.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And the trouble is that it feels the same whether the tiger walks into the room Or you just think about a tiger walking into the room. The physiological response is exactly the same, which can be a little frustrating.
Yeah. And, you know, I think we're all going to experience that to different degrees and in different contexts, but it all comes down to the same stuff. Yeah. Yeah, like with you, and the snake in one context was not scary
Yeah, it was
to you,
not scary at all.
but in another,
The snake by your foot when you're not expecting it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's a different experience.
and now that you're reflecting on it, there's probably a part of you that's like, ooh, blurred.
No, because I now know that I can levitate.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. But
No, but if I was walking through the hills up here and I walked by a rattlesnake that rattled at me, I would have exactly the same reaction. I wouldn't go, oh, it's just a rattlesnake. I can stand here and piss it off.
yeah. Yeah.
No, it would be definitely make like a sheep herder, get the flock out.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, thank you so much for bringing that stuff up, because we do need to understand that the things that we perceive are not always, you know, reflected in consensus reality, as we could say. But that doesn't change the sense of it being real in our bodies, and that's what we need to address. Any other thoughts? Do you have any other thoughts?
I don't
I'm
have
gonna
any
bother
thoughts.
people then.
Okay, bothers you. There's a couple of people we haven't heard from.
James, how about you?
I've got a bit to say. Firstly, have to throw in the Dune reference, fear is the mind killer.
Yes.
I had been
But
thinking.
what was interesting about that whole little listening against fear is that at one point it says, you know, I will observe my fear. It wasn't, although it was saying at the start, I must not fear. It also says, I will observe, I will acknowledge my fear. I'm saying it's there. I'm not kidding myself. And I know in my own experience, because I was brought up on German Stoicism and denying whole chunks of your internal experience. Did me no good. In fact, before I hooked up with the 9-sided circle, I'd had about 6 sessions with a psychiatrist in regards to generalized anxiety and such. So I'm aware of the limitation of that. I don't know if I can really add anything more to anything anyone's already said. That's the only thing. I have my own bizarre fears. My fear of adapting to normal mainstream society. Because like throw me in a mosh pit with a pack of punks, and I'm quite confident, but put me in an office and I get the fear. And it's just conditioned responses, very little to do with the reality of either situation. So my fear has a history. I think everybody's fear as human beings have a history, because we add our story to our fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not just just animals. We're not just reacting to immediate predatory threats in the jungle. We fear the loss of our self-image, humiliation, ostracization by the tribe, not meeting certain goals. We add whole new wonderful layers of fear to our animal situation. That's pretty much all I could say at the moment. That doesn't cover anything that anyone else hasn't already said. I actually find it encouraging, though, that you start off with that everybody fears. And that's something I've learned to see, that I'm not some unique sniveling weakling.
Not at all.
But that this is, part and parcel of the human condition. Because where I was brought up, if you showed fear, not only were you probably physically attacked, because people like to circle around anyone who's scared and go in, but also you're emotionally attacked and condemned and for showing fear. So yeah, that's it. That's my contribution.
It's a good contribution.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned, like creating a sense of, oh, it's not okay to show fear. And one thing that I strive towards is, while challenging people, creating a space in which it's okay to bring those fears to the table and talk about them. So I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah, and it helps not to live in a Lord of the Flies environment.
It does. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. But it's weird the things you can get used to.
Oh, yeah.
And you can find yourself confident in situations that scare others, but the total reverse, scared in situations that others are quite smooth with. It's interesting. Yeah. I find myself confident in situations that would probably put others on edge, but then put me in more normal situations, and I feel it not completely at sea, but it's a whole new set of insecurities.
Yeah. And I think there are ways that we can utilize those differing strengths and struggles to encourage each other rather than break each other down. Yeah. Without, like, I can do this, why can't you? But like, hey, well, I'm doing it and it's easier for me, but I'm not at risk of dying. So let's witness each other succeed from that, Yeah. Thanks, James. We haven't heard from
Yeah, she only wrote something.
She did. And it was great.
Yes. But perhaps she's not in a place where she can talk.
Perhaps not, yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Thank you for letting us know that you're not in a place where you can talk. That's completely fine. I know that this is a place where you are growing and strengthening your own resiliency too. So I know you're doing this work, just as we all are. Yeah.
You know what time it is?
I think it's time to
have lunch.
Go on Brady Bunch mode and say goodbye to each other for now.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see some of you this evening.
And if we don't, we'll miss you.
Yeah, but thank you so much, everyone. I'm sorry to skip out quickly. I actually have the worst headache ever right now. So we're going to go get some food, have some water, take some ibuprofen, and get ourselves well situated to hang out with you again this evening. So bye, everybody. Thank you so much. See you later.